right. Happy Sunday night. Happy end of the week. Happy end of 2020. Merry
Again.
Christmas and Happy New Year. There's a lot to celebrate. I don't know if I'm going to be partying that hard about it, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, I want to welcome John on the show. Always great to have you. John, my brother here, has been with me from the very beginning of the show. And then Josh, who's been on the show for about the past month. Man, we appreciate your
Good to
time.
have you,
And thank you
Josh.
so much for being on here. Josh from Saving Elephants Podcast.
Great to
So,
be here. Hallelujah. We're about done with 2020.
I know, man. And
Yeah.
I'm having a very 2020 kind of day.
Yeah.
So Christmas was awesome. We had a great time, bunch of presents for the kids and stuff. Got my wife's like a little. It's basically made out of oak, but this thing she can put on the bathtub, and then it holds like your phone, and you can put like a glass of wine and put a candle on there, or whatever. So it's a little
Oh,
tree that
nice.
sits across. Got her that, some clothes and stuff, a few other things that she wanted, and then obviously John, like you and the family all pitched in, got me some boxing stuff, which I'm definitely going to enjoy, but not anytime soon because we all got some kind of cold and stuff the day after Christmas. So
Uh-huh.
yesterday and then today we've kind of been down. So I will not be drinking tonight. I've got some Canada Dry Ginger Ale is how I finish out Conservatism on
choice.
Tap 2020. I do have my Constitution glass here. This is from from Lucky Shot from one of our affiliates. So I've got a very fancy glass that I normally drink beer out of, but that is not what I'm going to be drinking tonight because I am trying to recover. But it's great to see you guys. It's always fun, and I'm happy to power through for that. So, but let me
Dude, I
ask
hope you
you.
feel better. I hope you feel better,
I
man.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers to that. But let me ask you, Josh, how was your Christmas, man? How'd it go with you, your girlfriend, and all that? Did you guys have a great one?
Yeah, I was telling John, I guess, kind of in the green room before we hit record. It is different. I mean, it's not that it
It
was
really is.
not that probably all of our Christmases were a little bit different than what we're used to.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It was more low key. It was a little bit more. I would like to say less stressful, but I am a compulsive. I don't shop early enough in the year, and then it becomes it's kind of like every night I stay up a little too late, and the next morning I'm like, well, tomorrow, tonight I'm going to get to bed early.
Yep.
Same every year with Christmas. So that part was a bit stressful, but other than that, it was a pretty peaceful holiday. It was low key, fewer parties, fewer get-togethers, but still able to through Zoom and the phone talk to the people I love. So that's what matters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thankfully we have the kind of technology. I think I talked about this when the crisis first hit and stuff, and ongoing. Is it really does feel like a military type deployment? Like that's what you experience when you're overseas, and you're like it's happened to me a few times when you're stuck out there. I was in Afghanistan and then West Africa, and you miss things like birthdays and holidays and stuff, and then you're kind of doing it this way. Is you kind of push that stuff to the back, and you celebrate over the phone as best you can, and then you end up shipping people stuff and everything. So for me, it's something that I had experience doing, but yeah, I get it. It's still can be pretty tough.
It's
How about
gotten
you, John?
harder for us. It's gotten harder for us just because we had the neighborhood kids that could come out and play, and they all gathered together. But now because it's the winter, I guess they just don't play as much in the cold.
Yeah.
Like the kids don't, and the kids don't really want to go outside unless they already see other kids outside.
Yeah.
And so like they go out there and they see nobody, and they just come back inside, and they get stir crazy for like the past few weeks. So we went over to the playground and tried to run around a little bit, but they'll run around for like a few minutes, and they're like, "Want to go back inside? It's warm." And so you're like, "Please just go run 3 laps before you come back to the car." And it's usually me being like, "Come on, we gotta go," and it wasn't like that. So it's definitely different. The Zoom calls were many, and there was a lot of feedback going through, so that was kind of harder for the family to all kind of see each other and get together. And normally, we see my wife's side of the family throughout the entire week, and that just wasn't happening. Some of them are in California, some of them are over like near Bristol and Jonesville. So we all just ended up Zooming together, and
It's all
Well,
about
that-
making the most of it, right? Like
yeah, usually that means like you give the phone to the kids, and they use the Facebook effects to give themselves
Sure.
like unicorn horns or something.
oh yeah,
But I mean, like that's what they need to do to connect a little bit more, and so that's what we were able to do. Which is
We've
fine.
talked about it many times, but I think it's going to be amazing when our kids grow up, John, and they're like, "Wait, I lived through that." It's kind of like it's like me, like
Yeah.
realizing that when we were born, the Soviet Union was still around. It's like, wait,
Right, I didn't feel
there was a
that.
nuclear war. All I remember is like running around in a wheelbarrow outside with our grandfather. Like
Picking up walnuts, right? Exactly, and like they're
Picking
going to be
up,
looking
like-
at the history books
Wait, a
And they'll be like,
pandemic happened? Is that
what?
the year that you took us out for ice cream at that unicorn shop? Like,
Like,
you took us
you
to
tell
the
me
big
the year that
playground? I don't know.
you bought me the baby Yoda and we watched Mandalorian, like, COVID was happening and people were, it was the worst that's happened since, January. Oh my God.
Yeah, so no, I hear you, man. So, and for it looks like we got 3 or 4 folks that are watching live. So, I'd love to hear um, for those that are watching. How did you get through Christmas? What'd you do differently? How'd you make the most of it? For me, a couple things is I got a milk frother. So, in addition to all the cool stuff that y'all got me, John, my wife got me a milk frother. So now I have the ability to you just basically fill it up with either cream or milk or almond milk or whatever else you want, and then it just spins it and heats it and frosts it just like they would do at Starbucks or whatever coffee shop. So I've been making like all kinds of amazing hot chocolate, and you can do espresso, whatever else you want. It is ridiculous. So that's been good. And then she got me an air fryer. So I've been slicing up
Yeah.
apples and putting cinnamon on them, and then just air frying the crap out of that.
That sounds awesome.
So
Dude,
we've been having some fun with.
so Wes, I mean, I gotta tell everybody who's watching right now, like Wes got me this ale tankard. It's an ale horn. So it's actually made out of ox horn. And it's one ox horn, and it just you have the tankard and it loops around. And it can probably hold at least like 2 or 3 pints of ale. And but man, that thing, Wes, that is legit. Like you put your nose in that, it smells like a horn. Like it smells like an ox.
I know.
What does an ox horn smell like? I guess I've never smelled one.
Well, I guess when I was giving the Christmas story to Ellie and Addie, and I said that Jesus was born in a stable, they were like, "What was that like?" And I said, "Smell this." And they're like, "So Jesus was born in that?" I was like, "Pretty much, yes." And I was like, "Just drink it out of it."
I'm glad you like it, man. Yeah,
It's
I had
great.
seen that come through like my feed. I guess my phone knows that I would like that. Mark Zuckerberg was like, "Yeah, I'll probably like this," and I was like, "Oh, I know somebody who'll like it even better."
Yeah.
I pegged that like 6 months ago. That's great, man. I'm looking for you. Have to bring it on the show sometime, and we'll take a
I
look at it.
will. I gotta watch it, but I will.
So the other thing that we did is, we had run through all the cartoons and all that stuff. I got into It's a Wonderful Life based on your recommendation, Josh. And I found out, and maybe you knew this already, that they have a color version. I had seen it when I was a kid, but it was always black and white.
Me
So
too, yeah.
have you seen it in color before?
I don't think that I have. I'm assuming that was kind of a novelty that was added years later. I know sometimes like with old movies they'll redo it years
I think
later.
that's what they
Is
did.
that-
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
fascinating when you see it in color because there's all kinds of details and things that you see that you never saw before. Just
Hmm.
incredible amount, like people in the background and their facial expressions and all kinds of stuff that got lost.
Hmm.
That
Cool.
was fascinating, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it because there's many things that struck me about it, which was because I try not to think in terms of politics all the time, especially on Christmas. Hence, we have the show now. I can like air out my opinions and not like just overwhelm my wife with stuff she doesn't care about. But it's always amazed me, and I remember thinking this years ago, like where does capitalism fall into this whole ethic, of the movie? Because it's an amazing story of this guy who constantly sacrificed for others, right? Like he saves his brother, loses hearing in his ear because he jumps into the icy waters and saves his life, and then
Mhm.
he's constantly giving up his dreams and stuff for other people, for his dad, for his brother, for the business, for the town, and then that comes back to return a favor to him whenever he's kind of at the end of his rope because his assistant brother-in-law, I think, or something, loses a bunch of money, and Potter steals it, who's like the greedy capitalist businessman. But I'm curious because, like, I always see on conservative Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and stuff, we're always praising capitalism. And I was thinking about between this and A Christmas Carol and so many other movies, like, where does, when you hit Christmas time and you think about this and what's best about, the world and the season and America and all those things, where does capitalism fit into that? And in this movie specifically, I think that's actually the debate, right? Is there's a capitalism with the George Bailey philosophy, and then there's a capitalism with the Potter philosophy. So I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that, but I found that to be fascinating the whole way through. Is they're both talking about development and trying to get people in homes and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's a scene when George Bailey, I think, hasn't he like inherited the bank, and then the bank doesn't have quite a whole lot of money to make good on like people's,
It's like the
people
Great
who want,
Depression. Yeah.
yeah, because they're wanting to cash out, right? They're wanting to cash out everything they've got, and they don't have enough cash to be able to like throw at people. But George like ends up using some of his charisma and his own goodwill to like help bring some peace to people and say like, I can't give you everything that you want, but I can at least get you like your necessities and what you need. And rather than like just closing the bank down, he tries to piecemeal as much cash as he can for people. So he can't give one person all they ask, but he can give enough so that they can like eat for the next day, or like get the transportation they need to get to their job. So like he does, there is that affirmation there, but about giving people, just enough of what they need to make it through to the next day through his own goodwill. So, I mean, I guess when you're asking that question, that's kind of one of the things that I'm thinking about that isn't so much anti-capitalism, but it's very much on the giving side of capitalism.
What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess I'm not privy to these debates I've heard about It's a Wonderful Life in particular. I know there's a movie called They Live, I think, that is heralded sometimes as being the most brilliant Marxist film, which is hilarious because John Carpenter, the producer, is like, huh? No, no, it's not. It doesn't have a Marxist message. I don't know what you're talking about. And sometimes I think we tend to read our worldviews into films. It's not that that isn't there, but I'm almost even thinking of It's a Wonderful Life. Boy, you could even think of the town represents the proletariat and Potter represents the bourgeoisie, and this is the communist uprising about the social order pulling together. But from a capitalist perspective, I mean, it was all voluntary. It was individuals choosing out of their own goodwill to pull together in a means that is not I guess compulsion is the word I would be looking for.
Right.
But yes, Potter definitely represents kind of the inherent greed, I guess you could say, that's within the system. I don't know that that's capitalistic necessarily. You can see that in a compulsive system also. But there is I think it is helpful. Speaking as a conservative, and I would presume you guys would agree with this, I am a capitalist, but I also think that capitalism is a necessary but insufficient condition for a free republic.
Right.
Right. It takes an underlying moral code beyond that. I'm not a libertine. I don't think it's just a matter of leaving everybody to their own devices and we all get by just fine. I think it actually does matter what we do with the things we possess.
Yeah.
And that movie is in a very real degree a good indication of both, both the capitalist market at work, but also those choosing both good and ill.
Yeah. There's a scene in the movie where I think it's like really, really important. It's where George Bailey finally gets the chance to leave, right? He's going to go travel and stuff. He's giving up, he's not even on the board or even a member, right, of the business. But his dad has died, and so he's settling the affairs and things. And it's that whole point where he makes the decision to actually like be the chairman because he just like starts telling Potter off and gets them all fired up because he hears Potter like making moves and stuff to take control of the entity, and they actually argue over a specific family who I don't even know if they're in the movie. But Bailey is like, well, hold on a minute, I gave them that loan. And then like Potter calls them riffraff and, they won't pay up and all that stuff. And he's like, yeah, but they're actually going through something really tough right now and they need a chance. And they go back and forth. And it's ultimately what gets, George involved in the building and loan is he's constantly doing this, but with the people in mind, whereas Potter's like trying to keep them down. And I thought that was fascinating is George Bailey constantly accuses Potter of keeping his customers down. And so there's this notion of doing business that has the term I believe is value creation. It's right. It's creating something of value to people within a free society that they want, choose, versus what Potter's doing is basically keeping them down, is, forcing them into a situation where you are, the only one. And he's trying to monopolize. That's what he's trying to do, is to monopolize the industry and cut out all the competition. So just fascinating stuff that's like underlying this movie that's mostly about, relationships and,
I do think there's even a debate on the right, because I think from a certain lens, you could even say that is an example of, say, localism, a particular form of capitalism, right? Because it's not that Bailey, I was saying Ron Bailey, George Bailey, there we go.
Yeah.
It's not that George Bailey is saying I'm heralding capitalism. It's, hey, I know this specific family. Here's how the savings and loan has helped this specific family. And that is a very legitimate form of capitalism, but there's also another form of it, which I think kind of gets maligned in the movie and represented by Potter, but it can have a very beneficial effect, which is an individual can work for their own self-interest and inadvertently help people on the other side of the planet they're never going to meet.
Right. Right. That's
And
what's interesting is, so many times we make the argument that capitalism is a system that benefits people. And, to what extent is there any redemption whatsoever for Potter and what he was doing? Because could the building of loan done it by its own side? And yet he's complete, like, terrible, villain with no
yeah,
sense of no heart whatsoever. So, anyway, I just thought it was fascinating. One of my favorite things, and I really hope you get a chance to see it, is you've obviously got, the movie itself, which most people have seen. Seeing it in color is fascinating. There's a Saturday Night Live skit from a few years ago with Dana Carvey in it. And it's basically called George's Revenge. And in this, I don't think you've seen it, John, right?
Yeah, I have.
All right, Josh, you got to go see this, brother, because in this one, it's basically like, how Marvel does their post-credit scenes or whatever? It's basically like that. And what happens is after, he gets the money and he like doesn't go to jail and settles like the debt, they basically like Uncle Billy remembers. He's like, "Oh, I finally remember. I had the money and it was stolen by Potter." George leads the mob, like everybody that's at his house, right? He's like, "Let's get him!" And then they all like show up, and Potter's like, "What? You're supposed to be in jail?" And he's like, "I'm not going to jail, and I want a piece of you, Potter." And then they start beating.
I think the best part is when Potter actually stands up from his wheelchair.
Yes,
he's like,
he's never crippled to begin with.
Get him, beautiful holiday traditions.
Like. He starts dismembering him, but it's like a dummy, or something like that. They just kill him.
Yeah, he starts like.
They get Mary involved. He's like, he throws Potter at Mary, and Mary starts like ripping him out and everything.
Yeah, it's this constant, thing of just kind of trying to fill in a plot hole because Potter essentially gets away with it. He stole all this money and he breaks the rules of capitalism and like government and just basic common decency right at some point in the movie. And then there really is there is no redemption at that point because he stole that money and then lied about it and stuff. So at that point, it really goes off the deep end, and that's what I always think about that as they try to fix that whole part of it.
Right.
But it's a great movie, man. I love it. I think about that too because, and the whole economic side of it, because we were just on the other show talking about this COVID-19 bill, and we were talking for like 10 minutes straight, me and Kyle and Chris on this, about just the monstrosity that our government is and like the system and everything else right now. This bill, I actually have it up on my phone here. I've looked at it a few times. It's 5,593 pages. It was given, if you were a congressperson, Josh, if you were a congressman, representing Oklahoma, you would have received this bill and you would have had less than a day to review it before voting on it. Like they would have handed it to you, been like, here you go. And then we're voting tonight, right? Like that's how they did it. And you have Congress people who are like on their phones and tweeting and stuff being like, I was given this with no shot. And just the enormous amount of pork in this thing is absurd. Just all kinds of projects, essentially an omnibus spending bill that's attached to this thing that allows Congress to just force through every type of special interest or moneyed interest that you can imagine. Foreign governments, projects, like what raises to themselves, everything. And then at the end of it, like, oh, and here's $600 for the Americans who funded all this stuff. Like, here's a tip, while we take your food, like amazing, truly, amazing. Because I think about the situation that we're in. We talked about Trump and, as he's leaving office, he promised to fight the swamp and not succumb to these interests. And like, that's exactly what's happening at this point. But hey, what was he supposed to do at this point? Like not sign it. And then all the, the benefits expire indefinitely.
Well, what he was trying to do was ask for more money.
Yeah, I know. He's trying to get more money for American people, but none of that would have solved all the pork and corruption in this thing. It's amazing.
Well, he would have held the bill up and people would have gone without their unemployment, benefits, would have shut down the economy for a bit. So, yeah. I mean, plus it was his own negotiators were the ones talking about the $600, and then all of a sudden he just kind of like turns right around and asks for $2,000, but then he turns right back around and signs it, like
Yep.
it was really caused me like a lot of angst about like, does anybody know what's going on with this guy right now? Or is he just trying to stick it to Mitch because they supported Biden, because he won the election?
No, I mean, I think about it in bigger terms, John. Like I'm saying, so what's the appeal of Donald Trump? Whether you like him, whether you hate him, whether you're conservative like us or you're not, the appeal of Donald Trump is that he was self-funded, right? He was self-funded, so he could say whatever he wanted to. He didn't have to trade political favors back to anyone except, the people who voted for him, the far right, right? That was the appeal, as opposed to politicians who get hundreds of thousands of dollars from like the military industrial complex, right? So big contractors, or they get hundreds of thousands of dollars from specific businesses, Wall Street, whatever it is. And when those politicians have those type of donations in order to get reelected and to, continue to have that support that got them into office, it comes with expectations. Now you are going to vote a specific way. You're going to get my project through on the next available bill, right? Trump doesn't have that. He doesn't have that allegiance. He's not, and unlike the little guy who can't run for office against someone who's funded to the tune of $100,000 or more, he actually can, and he can beat him. So he did. And so his entire presidency has been about not what happens when you get someone in there who's a free radical, who is not going to succumb to those interests. And at many times he's done that. He's been politically incorrect throughout his presidency. He's voted the way that he wanted to on pretty much, or sign bills and things like that into law whenever he felt like it. And he's expressed his opinions openly on Twitter, to the chagrin of just about everyone who disagrees with him. But then we get to this point, and it's like the system won. The system won, because here is everything in my mind that Trump is against, that he doesn't represent, attached to this bill. Now, COVID relief, absolutely. That part of it, I think almost everyone agrees with, and I think that's what leads to the system doing what it does. Is we've got it gold. We've got something that Republicans and Democrats all agree on that Trump will sign. Cool. Here's everything else, right? That's going to attach itself to this train that can't stop, right? And if Trump had, for example, a line item veto, allows a president to sign certain parts of the bill in while crossing out others. If Trump, for example, had a line item veto, he would cross out enormous parts of this bill, but that's not a power that he had. That takes a constitutional amendment, to get. Something possibly he could have done at the beginning, early stages of his presidency, but certainly not something that he could have done anytime recently, but he doesn't have that power. It's either yes or no. That's it. You either sign it or you veto it. That's it. Yeah. So it's frustrating to me as we talk about like movies like It's a Wonderful Life, where there's this very clear ethic that is shown as good that we all agree with. And we see like, this self-interested, terrible form of capitalism, like, Josh was explaining, that's not even real capitalism. If we look at our system, where's our system at? It's like 60 to 70% Pottersville, is what I see. And then like 20 to 30% COVID relief, maybe,
Right.
We need a few more George Baileys and a few less Potters, man.
Well, my wife was asking me just a few other days, is like, how come they can't just, target a bill, and make sure they're sending relief to the people who need it the most. Yeah. And why do they have to throw everything else in to one huge bill, and then all of a sudden there's a standoff ever since, like, the government shut down originally, or the economy shut down, and because of COVID. Like, why do they have to throw it all in there? How come there can't be more nuance, not only to the policy that's being passed, but also to the care that's being given to people who are more high risk? I mean, even right now, Virginia is under the threat of pretty much being shut down again if they can't get their act together with COVID cases.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, really, is that what we need? Is that what our businesses need? You're going to basically shut down all of Richmond, and there are going to be even more businesses going under for that very reason. When, as far as I can tell, like, most of the states that have stayed open, I mean, their unemployment rate is pretty low, right? Like, their economy is actually doing better. I mean, just have more nuance and more care about who's higher risk, who needs more funding than others. But we always have to do these blanket general statements, everything from like the stimulus money that goes out to families to, whatever other policies they want to throw in. There's just no nuance to it. It's so frustrating.
Right. And DC's response, sentimental hogwash. Just poor, frustrated young man.
What piece of your problem?
Right. I mean, that's it. The reason that doesn't happen, that you don't have a government that's focused and targeted at the actual problem for which the bill is named, is because there's all these interests who have been expecting kickbacks. There are people who, if you are a business and you invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a political candidate, then you expect that person to be your guy or girl. And then when you have something that you want, right, you want something changed so that you can expand your business in a particular way. You want some law change because it's frustrating you. Hey, I invested $100,000 in you, man. I expect you to vote the right way and to put this project or this change in the first available opportunity. Well, here's a wide open opportunity, right? Clearly, like 5,000 pages of this type of thing happening, right? That's why. That's why. Could we have that? Sure, but we don't. We don't. That's not the system that we're with. That's what's frustrating to people.
It's frustrating. Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh, and then I got another comment here. It looks like
there's a
lot to say. I'm gonna have some more ginger ale.
I don't know how to summarize a $5,900 billion bill. I mean, I think one of my, and I know this is a little outside the realm of what we've been talking about. Sometimes within the conservative libertarian arguments, we have these discussions. Well, should we even be spending this money? Yeah. And I think that is a legitimate argument. And this is kind of one of my hobby horses. I think that pandemics and warfare are two areas where I'm way more sympathetic with the Fed spending a boatload of money.
Yeah.
But at some point, the math doesn't add. Like if we cannot get our entitlement reform under control, where we're just heaving cash, we have unfunded liabilities we do not know how to pay for. There's going to come a day when we have another, COVID 2021, say, where it turns out we can't do a $900 billion stimulus because there literally isn't the money to do it.
Right. Well, to be clear, and I said this in the show, not against COVID relief. Like, we need that. This is a crisis. Right. That's what you do. Is you draw from savings, you draw from your emergency funds, you draw from debt if you have to during a crisis. Like we certainly have. We had a hurricane hit us in Florida this summer, and we had to draw from our savings to get our pool fixed. Right. Like, that's what it's there for. It's all of this other crap that has nothing to do with it. That's what's frustrating to people. Mm-hmm. That's the part, is that we are the taxpayers. We're the ones that are funding this. Our kids are going to be funding this. Their kids are going to be funding this for years. And if it was all going to help us in our time of need, like, got it. Hey, mom and dad needed some extra money to be able to shield you from what was going out there because it was nasty out there with the virus, right? That makes sense. That's something that I can explain to my kids years from now. But hey, also, we wanted to fund this other country. We wanted to, build up some more military technology. We wanted to pay for the Kennedy Center, and we felt like Congress deserved a raise. So we felt like, they need to be making $127,000, $1,000 or whatever. Those kind of things are a lot less defensible. But hey, it was all or nothing, and it's the all or nothingness of this that is terrible. When you've got a definite yes. COVID was a COVID of relief, definite yes. We all agree on that. Cool. Then we're going to attach, everything else, and then we're going to use the no, right? The rejection of it, which no one wants to do, in order to force the yes, right? It's like it's putting someone between, a horrible situation, which is where all of the benefits, and you saw this as soon as Trump kind of waffled on it and waited a couple weeks, as he already started running sob stories of all kinds of people who were struggling, right? What does Trump need to do in order to fix this? Sign the bill. Sign the bill, because that's going to has nothing to do with everything else that is in the bill. It has everything to do with those people. And that's something that you got to say yes to. You got to. You don't want people's unemployment benefits to expire in the midst of COVID when the vaccine hasn't made it out. It's taming him. As now you see Trump shackled. You see his whole plan of fighting the swamp is now been shackled, which is not something I'm happy to see. So looks like we got the person who manages the Russell Kirk page, or it could be Russell Kirk
It
himself,
could be Russell Kirk. Yeah.
the ghost of
Back from the
Kirk.
dead.
We're big fans. I got a bunch of your books right here, Russell. Ask, did the Democrats win this battle? And I would say, the system won the battle. The system
Yeah.
won the battle. Sure, did the Democrats win it? Yeah, to an extent they did. It's a Pelosi Congress, but the system, it wasn't just Democrats voting for this. It was Republicans and everyone else under the sun because, again, no one wants to be thought of as against COVID-19 relief. Republicans have done this before. They did this with support for the troops and everything else during the Iraqi war, as they would have these huge defensive spending bills and they put all kinds of stuff into it. And they're like, oh, you're against the troops? Really? Like, it's when you have, a lock, stock, and barrel issue that is going to succeed. You can add whatever else you want to it. That's frustrating to me. That's frustrating to me because it doesn't seem particularly conservative, sensible, prudent, or a smart way to run your government. Yes, here we are. So it's I don't really know what the answer is to it, but my fear is that that's where we're going to, is a place where people stop even asking that question.
Yeah, I think it also kind of muddles up like what exactly is needed for the for COVID relief. Like I said before, like when you look at the bill, you can see who's getting some money, right? Like universities, even though they haven't really like lost any employees or have been hit too hard. You got museums and places of entertainment, airliners, like in a way you feel like the people are kind of funding losses here. It should fall on the shareholders, I think, that to eat some of those losses, but yet we're constantly funding these huge industries that are too big to fail. And then, like you said, Wes, they're just kind of tossing $600 in, like, hey, hope that'll get you through your mortgage or that's not even enough to afford like a one-room studio in Richmond, or even a two-room studio if you have a roommate. So like a lot of that is just kind of like, how much is this relief actually helping? And then on the flip side, back when the HEROES Act was trying to be passed, you had Pelosi saying that, well, hey, if we don't fund this, then the economy is going to crash. It's going to be terrible this year.
Right.
And the economy hasn't been actually as terrible as been projected. So even when it comes to how much relief that needs to be sent out, that's already kind of, a hot topic of debate. And then you've got all like 4,000 extra pages to be, thrown in there at the same time. The fact that like all this is going on, so much generalities without enough conversation about who actually needs this money, that is really what's great. I mean, I think also maybe you, Josh, when you're talking about how much money do we really need to spend?
Yeah, because you go back to the sense of again, the key topic is value creation, right? When you look at trying to bring this back to It's a Wonderful Life, I think it's hilarious whenever George Bailey, like he's never been born. Well, the city still existed, like he goes running through the city and stuff, and now it's Pottersville, right? And now it has a bunch of like strip clubs and like a whole bunch more liquor stores and like, it's completely shifted in terms of what it does for people. And a lot of the like small mom and pop shops and things like that, have changed, and people have become harder and they've become meaner in the city. You notice that, like, during his like vision or whatever. And so it's still a form of business and capitalism and all that stuff, but it's a darker, meaner form in which less value is being created for people, And I guess that's the concern here as I look at like our economy, I look at how like our government runs, and it just seems very dark. Like not everything is bad. $600 payments for people to get them through. Okay, I get it. Unemployment benefit, that's good. But at the same time, like an entrenched establishment of big government and big business, like still wins the day, still like is in control, giving you just enough, and saying, there you go. Right. Like it just sounds very Potter-esque. That's what I was thinking the whole time, like watching that movie is like, we are into that kind of crony capitalism type market. And I just don't, I'd say what you want about Trump, but I think one of the benefits of him is that he might not have had all the answers, but he definitely was targeted at some of the real problems, the system itself, being one, and not going the way that the founders have intended. I wish, go ahead.
I really wish that he had accepted the election so that he could focus a lot more on the issues that you're talking about, Wes. Instead, he decided to resort, for the most part, into either complete silence about supporting people, during this time when COVID cases are higher, death rates are higher, here in December than they've ever been. Like he could be making statements about that while at the same time taking it to Congress, taking it to them. But instead, like he's always had to play up like this election fraud, or this election fiasco narrative that he won't drop. And that I think that's where he's fallen apart
Well,
there.
I think he was constantly focused on immigration, as a key issue, and it's an important issue. But we're talking about something else entirely here. This is much bigger than immigration, right? And there's aside from the Supreme Court, which that's a big win. Certainly got to give him that. I would have loved to see some constitutional change. Whether that's a balanced budget amendment, whether that's a line item veto, things like that. That I think that could have happened, but we were so focused on settling personal scores and things like that time has passed, and I don't see it with the Biden administration. I guess that's my point. Is we start to hit 2021. This is our last show of this year. We start to enter a new year, and what is that going to bring? And I think in a Joe Biden administration, not a lot. I think it's going to be more of this type of thing. I don't think he's got first of all, he doesn't even have the support, even if he was the right guy. But I don't think he's not going to challenge the system. He's going to accept it. He's a system guy. He's been in government for decades. But there's
I would say that I think there's a sense in which you can be, and this is not meant as a defense of Joe Biden,
go ahead.
But I think I wouldn't say the system. I would say an institutions guy. I think what we need is someone who is pro-system, pro-institution, but not in a crony capitalist sort of way. Right. More in a sense of the Congress needs to be functional. Part of the reason we've got this monstrosity is we don't have a functional Congress, and I don't think you get there by putting in another Donald Trump type that's just there to tear it to pieces, but someone who is there saying, hey, this thing actually needs to work. And going to, Russell Kirk, I'm a huge fan of your work. So I'll, to weigh on your question of did Democrats win this battle? And Wes, I kind of agree with you in a bad sense of the word, the system won, right? The Democrats, from what I understand, were initially asking, let's see, the CARES Act, which was $1 trillion act passed earlier this year, had $150 billion that went to the states and local governments. As part of what I do in my job is I audit some of that money that trickled into Oklahoma. The Democrats were asking in this particular package for $1 trillion, from $150 billion to $1 trillion. They're also asking for a significant extension of unemployment benefits, which I think they received some, but not all of that. From what I understand in this bill, this was really, really close to what I think it's called the Problem Solvers Conference in Congress, which is a group of, I didn't know there were any, but a group of moderate Democrats and Republicans still left. They were trying to flesh out, hey, okay, the Democrats want, the Democrats were asking for at minimum $2 trillion. The Republicans were saying, nope, nothing anywhere near that. And so they tried to find something in the middle. And far be it from me to be the optimist in the group. I'm usually not. But in a weird way, there's a lot of positives in this bill. There's an awful lot of negatives. I don't disagree with anything we've been saying. It could have been a lot worse. There could have been a lot of money that went to states and local governments, and maybe somebody argue that's not too bad. But I think in that sense, I don't think I would call this a Democrat or Republican win. I think this was a genuine compromise, which is good. But in order to get to the genuine compromise, we also had to add to it a lot of pork type things that is not good.
Right, and that's the point. Yeah, bipartisanship for sure. And that's a good thing. But when it's saddled with enormous amounts of debt, and it's not going to help those who are actually in need.
Right.
or not only, it's going to a whole bunch of other things in much bigger quantities. That's the concern. But, what I look forward to is I think there's a chance here for, conservatism. Conservatives have learned how to win. I think that's key, right? Like Trump, there was a lot of winning in the Supreme Court. They had Congress for a while and things like that. But more solutions. I would love to see more solutions at a fundamental level. Is that Trump has significantly changed the vocabulary, in terms of politics. Things like establishment and swamp and all that stuff are now very present. But in terms of fixing it, it was so much of he's going to do it. He is the gift from God to do it. He's Moses, in modern times, all this kind of stuff, this personality type, deal of Trump's going to do it. Whatever he says goes. If that means we need to, cozy up to Russia and build a wall, then there we go. But I would like to see more in terms of solutions that actually attack this problem of how our, Congress works, of how bills are done. And again, I've mentioned a couple of solutions on here that people have. It's just those are going to take fundamental changes because the system is fundamentally constructed
Mhm.
this way. And it's going to take conservatives. And there have been candidates who did this before, but they've typically fallen along the wayside. I'm thinking of like Herman Cain, who we talked about months ago, unfortunately passed away because of COVID. But someone like him who comes in with, "Hey, I've got solutions, 999 plan," like things like this, is starting, to look at candidates based around policies, that actually attack the system, or the institution, if you will, and start to change it, more towards something that actually is aligned with the interest of people, especially at the locust level. Because I mean, that just goes back to it is when you look at the local piece of this. George Bailey is out there like fighting for people that he knows. He's got a relationship with these people, and Potter doesn't. They're just a riffraff or a rabble to him, even though Potter lives down the street. He's not engaged in any type of relationship with them, and I think that's what's missing. And most people don't know who their congressperson is. They don't know anything about this bill. Like whatever. They just see a Republican, Democrat, and that's it. And we've got to do more. And I think we can. So anyway, that's a big part of our show. I'll look forward to the future of it. I look forward to talking with you guys. Um, as we head into 2021, that's really what I want us to do is to start looking at what are policy proposals and, what are solutions and how do we broadcast those to everyday working folks like us to be able to recommend, and we're going to go several years, it looks like, with a Biden presidency, Republican Congress or Republican Senate at least. What does that look like? And what do we want to see the next time there is, a presidential election, and what type of policies would you want to see them propose? And then in the meantime, how do we, use the existing system and the struggle to be able to show how our solutions will be different? So I think it's gonna be fun. It'll be a really good conversation. In the meantime, we'll watch the movies too and apply it to those. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for your time. I want to give each of you a last word here while I get my last little swig of ginger ale, and then I
That's
go
right.
lay up in my bed for several hours. But go ahead, John. Last
My
words of
all my
2020,
alcohol is
my
officially
friend.
gone from my house for this year. Going to start fresh, which will be great. I guess my closing thoughts on this year is just as you go into 2021, just consider ways that you can give to your local community, and not mistake, commenting on social media as being as doing your part.
Yeah.
Find ways to actually get involved. I guess it's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey ends up getting down on his luck, and the entire community rallies around him to support him. And so I think that's what I'd like to see more of, just new creative ways for people on a local level to support their local businesses, local families, people in need, and that are down on their luck.
Absolutely. That's a great thought. Josh?
I'd like to think that adversity builds character, and it obviously does. It can go the other way sometimes. 2020 for a lot of us, I know for me personally, I'm sure for you guys, for lots of people, has been a very, very difficult, very challenging year. I don't think that when you turn the calendar, somehow all those problems just disappear. But I think
Right.
there is some sense that we've all got a collective sort of, well, looks like the virus might be winding down. Maybe 2021 will be a lot brighter. I think more than anything, I would think learning how, and I'm saying this for myself as much as anyone else, learning how to maintain gratitude for the things that we maybe all took for granted
Yep.
prior to the lockdowns occurring. Just little things like just being able to, spend time with family at Christmas. I mean, I've always been grateful for that, but I've never had to think, wow, what happens if all of a sudden this just disappears one year?
Right.
And I think just being able, I hope, and I mean that even from a interpersonal level, as far as us trying to build up our communities, that when we are able to meet face to face, to learn not only not to take that for granted, but wow, this is something that my life is so much more enriched with this. I need to defend this maybe more so than I thought I had.
Well, and there's a great way to do that. There's a quote by Edmund Burke when he says, "When bad men combine, the good must associate." Right.
Mm.
And what I take from that is everything that you guys just said, Josh and John. Amazing things that we don't do as individuals or by ourselves. Right. We have to work together on this. Whether you're going to help somebody in need, John. Like you want to do that with other folks. Let them know, hey, this is someone who needs help. Let's all do it together. And the same for what you were saying, Josh, is like we have to be able to reach out and like bring other folks into that. And that's the only way that any type of good change I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Is God has given us, our lives and an opportunity to build relationships with people. And that's something that, like, again, George Bailey, great example of that, of this fictional character who goes out and spends his life helping other people. And then they're there whenever he needs them. And it's the same for us, is spending our lives doing that, is finding other good folks that are in need, and figuring out ways to help them, and then bringing other people into that effort and inspiring them, and passing it on. So great thought, man. Great ethics. Definitely. I mean, that really, like, that speaks to the ethic of the season in an amazing way. Kind of brings it all together. So looking forward to it. Thanks so much for your time, guys. Thank you, Josh. Saving Elephants podcast, amazing website, amazing blog to go check out. Great interviews there. I know we've talked about it. And then John, thank you so much for being a part of this project from the beginning. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it. And we will see you on our next episode in 2021.
Take care.